Good evening. Thank you so much for joining another time. And we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And this night, or tonight, I should say, why should I say esta noche? All right, tonight, we are going to talk about the recently held protest action that was launched in New York today at the Jamaican Consulate, right? And that protest action was generally about corruption in Jamaica and the fact that Jamaican politicians have been engaged in acts of corruption over the years, which have resulted in Jamaica moving behind, going backward instead of forward. And Jamaicans have expressed their dissatisfaction with how the government is being run. Now, that we cannot deny that our government is corrupt, that our governments have been corrupt over the years, and that citizens have not yet really stood up to the government and said enough is enough. Because as far as we're concerned, the government is heading or bringing us in a direction that is not going to land us in safe harbor, that economically, socially, psychologically, the nation is backward, right? We can say that Jamaica has not progressed, even though we are 62 years in independence. Well, I'm not sure that we are independence. I think that we are independence, that we are actually depending on other people to sustain us and to carry us on their backs. As I've said on this program multiple times, that we are a colony of the United States practically, and that we do not run the show, and that we're not really running our own affairs. Most of the important decisions are really made in Washington, D.C. It's time for us now to accept that fact. I think many of us still have not come to grips with that fact, with that reality, because in the school system and also in the political organizations that we have there, people tend to diffuse this false notion that we are in charge of our own affairs. Now, remember now that if we are not economically dependent, or independent, I should say, if we're not economically independent, it means therefore that somebody else is going to control us. And that was the whole notion of slavery, that slaves were what? Economically dependent on their slave masters. As a result of that, they could not have been free until they became economically solvent, right? Were they able to buy their freedom and to gain some form of physical freedom and to move around and to be mobile. Outside of that, if they had to depend on their masters for sustenance, for food and shelter and clothing, it means therefore that they were entrenched in slavery and they were not going to be got rid of. They could not remove themselves from the tentacles of that institution, right? So something that we have to really pay close attention to is that slavery, as it was as an institution, is synonymous with the lack of economic freedom. So if Jamaica continues to be, under the tentacles of the IMF and the World Bank and all of these other neoliberal institutions, then it means therefore that we are not free. We're not fully free as a nation as we ought to be. And I think that we have become so indoctrinated into this neoliberal economic model of development, which does not have any poster child, as it were. All of the IMF policies have failed in the countries that have applied these policies, in the countries to which or in which these policies have been applied. So it's therefore important that we begin to understand that and begin to accept the reality. The IMF, the World Bank are not our saviors, right? They are not going to lead us into the land of milk and honey. And I'm still hearing people uttering the pronouncements from our politicians that Jamaica is the fastest growing economy in the Caribbean. Where did you get that from? From the IMF? I keep on asking people, show me the evidence. Where is the evidence? When people land in Jamaica, when they're walking the streets, they're not seeing that. If Jamaica is the fastest growing economy in the Caribbean, I'm not saying that you're going to go down there and see untold wealth, right? Obscene wealth, but what you're going to see is people surviving, and that you don't see the level of desperation, economic desperation and depravity that we are accustomed to seeing when we land in Jamaica. Right? This is what people are saying, and oftentimes what our politicians say and the realities on the ground are very, very distinct. Right? We see stark contrast between what the pronouncements that they often utter and what the realities on the ground portray. Something that we need to look at. So I think Rattigan and Herb Nelson and the others who were protesting, their rights to protest were justified. And we can say that if they're genuine, right? Because right now we cannot know who is genuine from who is not genuine, right? Because everybody seems to have his or her own agenda when we look at everything. So we have to look at who is behind that sort of protest actions, because all protest actions have economic contributors who contributed, toward that sort of protest actions, right? And what is their agenda? Now, what are your solutions, Rattigan and Herb Nelson, to Jamaica or for Jamaica? What do you think are the prospects for us? And what type of government are we trying to work for, all right, or to achieve? What type of government would you want to achieve in Jamaica? As far as you're concerned, or as far as I am concerned, in the United States, where you are actually domiciled, it is known to be also one of the most corrupt countries in the world. Americans are also protesting. You see what is happening on the college campuses. And in fact, the students' voices are being suppressed right there in the United States, the exemplar of freedom and democracy. And I understand that that is the example that you have always cited, you, Herb Nelson, and also Wilfred Rattigan, the United States as a country of law and order, and that's what people can do and cannot do in the United States. But so often when we speak about the United States, we tend to speak about it in a way that makes it appear as if the United States is the paragon of virtue, is an example of transparency in the world. But if we read enough and if you are truthful, you'll understand that it is not, right? Because it is a military colossus, and it has done a lot of problems. It has really created, it has manufactured a lot of problems, as it were, in the world. And so many people are suffering because of what the US military and militarism, as we have said on this program, and imperialism have done to their country and to their people, right? So we have to really bring that to the fore, that the United States is not Jamaica's example, in terms of being a republic, because the United States is not a republic at this moment. It is a military empire. It's a military colossus. It has lost that status as a republic, and I think that that status was lost from the Civil War. That that was the Civil War that was launched, all right, that was undertaken in the years 1861 to 1865, right? That Civil War, Americans lost a lot of the institutions, because remember now that before the Civil War, the federal government did not have the level of power that it has right now, that it had even post-Civil War, and that it has amassed over the years until now, where we're having presidents making a lot of executive orders as if that is the order of business. That is the order of how republics ought to be run. And that is the antithesis of a republic, right? Because we understand that the United States should have checks and balances, but what we have now is an imperial presidency, where the president is actually the central authority of the United States, who is head, so-called, of the military-industrial complex. So that is what the situation we have in the United States. So it does not make the United States as really the exemplar for Jamaica. maybe we could take some of their suggestions from the Constitution, yes, and some of the laws that they have there. But remember now that if the laws are not enforced, if they're not practiced, it means therefore that they are not, we can't cite them as an example to us, because they have to be practicing what they preach, and oftentimes the United States does not practice what it preaches. So this is what we have to understand. So I'm not sure what will be Jamaica's, or what country rather is Jamaica's example. That is what we would like to ask Ratigan and the Herb Nelsons and the others who were actually marching today in the protest actions that were held at the consulate, at the Jamaican consulate in New York City. Today, that was held, something that was very important, but did not receive the traction and did not really receive the support, based on what I saw, as what I thought it would have received. One of the things about Jamaicans is that they are online and they're listening to podcasts and they join into the Ratigans, and you see thousands of them online, and we think that they're going to be showing up and supporting. But, when it comes on to standing up, a lot of times they will back away. Because that's the nature of people in general. They will show us if they're supporting you, and when it comes up to showing up, they're not going to show up for you at all. People generally do not show up. Generally speaking, people do not show up when it matters. And if we remember the story of Christ, and when he said to Peter, he says, Peter, you are going to deny me. Peter was very, very, he was extremely confident of himself that he would never deny his Lord. He told him that Christ, even if I have to die for you, even if I have to die with you, I will never deny you. And Christ said to him, before the cock crows, you will have denied me thrice. And Peter was so self-confident, and so the Lord said so, and that was what was fulfilled. Peter actually denied our Lord, and he wept bitterly for having betrayed and denied, not betrayed, but denied his Lord, right? He denied his Lord, and to some extent, it was a betrayal of trust, because when they were asking him, do you know that man? Do you know the man? We've seen you with a man. He said, no. And he began to curse and to use swear words, because he was trying to conceal himself and say that he had no association with his Lord and Savior. Something to really understand. And it's not that Peter did not love his master, but he did not love him fully. He did not love him unconditionally. He loved him for what he could have gotten and his association with him at the time. Because at the time, the Jews believed that Christ had come to the earth to free them. It was all about liberation. As we're seeing now, everybody's protesting and they want to be free. But do you think that freedom is going to be achieved in this world? And mind you, I know that we should be guarding the freedoms that we have now, but we have never been fully free in this world. Because once we have the devil lurking in the air and he is a prince of this air, we are not going to be fully free, right? God might give us some freedom for a certain time, and we should really take advantage of that time and try to do as much as we can to preserve it. But we must understand that freedom is not etched in stone, right? And as far as I'm concerned, because we have given up our religious foundation, we are losing our moral fiber, the moral fabric that we should have to give us that sort of religious impetus, not religious impetus, the freedom, the impetus of freedom. It's sending us back into the days of the dark ages, because the Bible says that thy word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. So light continues to bear. Light means knowledge, right? And as we glean knowledge and wisdom and understanding, then we begin to understand what freedom is all really about. But as soon as we push the word of God away, and it's not that we're going to become a theocracy, right? It's just that we are going to use the word of God as the foundation for our moral compass. It is our moral guide. It is our moral mirror, the mirror that we look into to see if we are treading on the right path. Remember now that during the French Revolution, that is what the revolutionary France wanted. They wanted really to burn the Bible and to get rid of religion, which they eventually got rid of for a short time. But guess what? They had to really call back for religion. They had to reinstate religion very soon after they had renounced it, because they realized that blood flowed on the streets of France like river, right? Because when you don't have the word of God, then you're going to have what? Tyranny. Because you know what happens? When you put away the word of God, then you have men who set themselves up as the moral standard, the moral standard bearers of what morality is about. And we are not the moral standards by any stretch of the imagination, right? We are not the moral standards. God is, and his word is, right? The moral standard, the moral guide. It is the standard bearer, not men. And that is why we often, because you know what men do, they say, I'm better than he is, and I am more ethical and all of that. And we hear this from these people who are protesting and their leaders, right, saying that if you put me in office tomorrow, I will bring prosperity. And oftentimes, prosperity never comes, right? Never comes. And we have to be careful of that. As much as they would say that Marcus Mosiah Garvey had, a gigantic ego, but he believed in God. Marcus Mosiah Garvey believed in the God of the Bible. In fact, Marcus Mosiah Garvey is on, record stating many times that black people, Negro people, as he would call them in his days, should read the Bible. It's a major book to read. And that's one of the books that he's always prescribing, that black people read and understand for themselves, right? The Bible, the foundation of Western democracies and the freedoms that we hold so dear in the Western Hemisphere. Dr. Orlando Patterson, a Jamaican Harvard professor, he also read it in his book, Freedom of the Making of the West, or something of the sort. Yeah, Freedom in the Making of the West, right? I think that's the title of the book. And something that you should read. And Dr. Orlando Patterson is not very religious, right? He seems to be a secular humanist, right? So the fact of the matter, he himself, being honest with his scholarship, had to say that, outside of the Western societies, people really did not think about freedom as incorporating entire populations, right? They just believed that freedom, was really equivalent with the elites, right? With our leaders, with our political elites, with the religious elites, and should not be accorded to the common man. Something that we need to understand. So it's what the Bible talks about, God being not a respecter of any person, and that we are all equal in the sight of God. Now, it doesn't mean, therefore, that we play the same role, because we're living in a society in which people think that equality means that you have the right to play, all our roles are similar. And in the Bible, our roles are divergent, even though we are equal, right? Our roles are not always equal, right? But they complement each other to form a whole, right? To form a whole, a complete whole. Because without that complementary roles, then our world would not necessarily be an interesting place, right? So not everything a woman does, a man can do, and vice versa. Right? That's something that we have to understand. Equality does not mean, therefore, that everybody can do the same things, right? Because we know that people even have talents, and there are some who have 2, and some that might have 5, and you cannot reward them equally, right? Because if I can be a lawyer and a what do you call it now, an architect, and a teacher, a pilot at the same time, how can somebody who just is a teacher and who doesn't have those other skills to make more money? Obviously, the more talents you have, the more skills you have, the more that you are going to be able to earn, right? But we're living in a confused world in which people think that the fact of the matter is that we all are going to be on equal footing. But at this moment, at this present juncture of the history, I think that Jamaica is in a precarious situation. I think that we have not taken advantage of the time we had in the 1960s and 70s and beyond to have really developed our country. And now that the world in general is moving on a backward trend, I think that we find ourselves even further along that backward trend than most countries, right? I was talking to somebody recently, and the person told me that there's really nothing, incredibly wrong with Jamaica. Jamaica is really in the same situation like any other country. And I beg to differ. Yes, we're all in a predicament, and we are all heading in the wrong direction. But I think over the years because we have been on that wrong path for so long, we are about to sink. Might take others a little bit more time to sink, but we are going to sink so much quicker than the others who had really moved on, who had moved along and were heading in the right direction. But now they have turned, they have taken a detour, so it will take them some time before they sink, right? And we can look at Haiti. Haiti is being sunk right now as we speak, right? They are being sunk now. The country in general is definitely drowning in the sea of undevelopment, right? That is what we have to have. That's what we have to understand. That's what we have to try to grasp. That it is really, really because the country has not really developed its fullest capacity. That is why now it's in the sea, in the ocean, about to drown, right? About to drown. Now, it's not because of its own actions, but we know that there were also external influences that would have contributed to Haiti's downfall at the moment. Now, some of the things that we have to also look at, which Jamaicans tend not to want to look at, are the fact that we do not have an economy that is independent. I think that we now understand that we are in a global community. From the 1990s, we have been talking about the global village. And that global village means that we are interconnected and our markets are just not, say, a Jamaican market or it's a Barbadian market. It's just an interconnected market where people, global actors on the stage, control these markets, right? Another thing is that our politicians are not running the show. We know that they have financial donors that send them to power, and the financial donors are the local elites who work along with their global elites. How many times am I going to repeat that same fact, that same reality? So it means, therefore, that there's a hierarchical structure, and they do follow it. And that is why your presidents and prime ministers, a lot of time, they make promises that they often are not able to fulfill, right? Because they have to do the bidding of their financial masters and the global elites. You must understand that. So often we talk about Jamaica as if we are an independent nation, but we are not an independent nation. I think that we were fooled to believe that we were, all right? But we have never been an independent nation. Today, I was in a very interesting conversation with someone who had expressed consternation that she believed all the time, she's not Jamaican, that Jamaica was independent and that it was not a constitutional monarchy, because Jamaica is a constitutional monarchy in which symbolically King Charles is the head of state. The British monarchy is the symbolic head of state. But as I have suggested, the British monarchy is the symbolic. It does not mean that it is the proactive head of state. It is not an active head of state, and the British king really doesn't care about Jamaica and what's happening in Jamaica, right? It's not in his consciousness every day he gets up. However, we must say that since our independence, so-called independence from Great Britain, that the United States was the reigning superpower at the time. And remember now that we were caught in the crosshairs between the Soviet Union and the United States. And we opted to follow the United States model of development. Of course, we knew that Michael Manley was sort of trying to, to combine both ideologies, and we saw what happened to him. It means, therefore, that he was forced to choose one of the ideologies, that he could not combine these two ideologies, that of communism and capitalism. He said that he was what? Socialist, social democrat, right? The United States would not allow him to do that. And he had to give in. And in 1989, when he came in for a second term in office, he decided that he would submit to the US neoliberal agenda, right? And to US neoliberal policies of economic development. Mr. Manley himself, in the early 1990s, in the documentary Life and Debt, did acknowledge that the system was devastating. And he, even though he had embraced that system in 1989 when he returned to office, he was very, very articulate and expressed himself explicitly well that, that model of development wreaked, a lot of havoc on the Jamaican economy, and that we found ourselves, the Jamaican economy in essence was unraveling, and that people were not able to see any development, any improvement in their economic life. Now, what we have in Jamaica is an experiment that has failed, right? So we have in Jamaica essentially an experiment in independence that has failed, but perhaps we lied to ourselves. Maybe we should have been truthful to people to let them know that having, severed ourselves from the British monarchy in the sense that they were no longer responsible for us, that the United States would have been our new overseers or new overlords, but we did not acknowledge that. We seem to have been playing around with the idea that we were free, and that the British were still the symbolic head of state, and and all of that nonsense, that if we could just extricate ourselves from the British monarchy, then we could do everything for ourselves and everything would be well. But I must say to you that, if we should extricate ourselves tomorrow, but just by paper or on paper, from the British monarchy, I don't think that things are going to improve in Jamaica. Things are not going to improve. I dare say, if we should have Rattigan or Herb Nelson as the prime minister tomorrow, things are not going to change, because Rattigan understands the country in which he lives, or he should understand the country in which he lives, that the United States is a military. It's a military power, superpower, and it gets what it wants, right? And it's not there to share the resources, it's there to take, right? The United States wants all, right? It wants all, because the more it has, it's the more power it racks up, right? It's the more power that it's able to wield over the world, right? Something we have to understand. So when they see oil in Guyana, or the United States sees oil in the Middle East, its purpose is to control everything, all the resources, be it minerals or petrol or whatever it is that the United States sees it must control. And if it can't control it, it means, therefore, that it will manufacture wars and then use propaganda to unseat prime ministers and presidents, right? And the United States has been using this since 1949, 1950, right? In the 1950s, certainly by then, right, when they overthrew the Iranian president, right, Mossadegh, and then we talk about the Jacobo and the president also of Guatemala, and other successive presidents in 1973 in Chile, right, with Salvador Allende. So we should understand these facts, and the list goes on, right? The list goes on. When are we going to wake up and see that we're not living in the world as we have been told? And, I was thinking today that even during the Cold War, both of these so-called powers that were, contesting for power, for the supremacy over the world population, the Soviet Union and the United States, they were trying to corner us and to tell us that, to divide the world and say we should believe in their ideology. It wasn't free even then, because both powers were telling us that I'm the one who should follow, or the other, and they were not willing to say that maybe you could take some of that ideology and combine with this one. They were not willing to do that, right? Perhaps they allowed some of these European countries to do so, but certainly those of us in the South, in the global South, were just coerced to choose one major philosophy and one major ideology of development. We were not allowed to think for ourselves and to deal with our own socioeconomic realities. So I don't know what people mean when they say that we are free, as people often think. Yes, we should be really grateful for the freedoms, some of the freedom that we have, but we must understand that is the freedoms that our politicians think that we should have, and they're working as we speak to take away some of these freedoms from us, right? And if we were paying attention, what happened 4 years ago, I shall not say what it was on this platform, but what happened 4 years ago, many of our freedoms went, right? And it was because of many of the decisions, the poor decisions that many of the populace made. Many members of the world population made very poor decisions. And because of that, we lost a lot of our freedoms. And I think many of us think that we're just moving on and things are going to be jolly well for us, even though we gave up major portions of our freedom, at least recently, in recent times. You just went and you just allowed somebody to put something into your body, even though you knew, and some of you knew that what you were putting in your body was not the best for you. But guess what? You believe your leaders, right? And you did not understand that this was not just about that particular thing. It was much more than that. It involved much more than that. And sometimes when we see wars, we must understand that it's not just about a war in Iraq. It's not just about a war in Palestine, but it involves much more. Could be the erosion, the complete erosion of freedom of speech. That could be the agenda for which this war has been waged. And one of the things we have to understand is that, yes, all wars are going to result in some erosion of our freedoms, because wars and propaganda work in tandem. Let me repeat that. Wars and propaganda work in tandem. They're hand in glove, right? So that's what you have to understand. Once you have a wars, you're not going to have transparency. You're not going to have freedom of speech. You're not going to have good journalism. You're not going to have access to information. You're going to have lots of classified information, lots of secrecy, right? And you end up not knowing really what is happening. And many people are confused, right? They are confused. So what we're seeing happening as, these protesters, was a lackluster protest in New York led by Rattigan and some of his colleagues like Dr. Francis. I think I have nothing against you guys, but I think that you have to come with some practical solutions. And we must understand that we are also not functioning outside of a global context. I think that Rattigan and Dr. Francis and all of these other guys I've listened to sometimes on their podcast need to let Jamaicans understand that Jamaica is not operating in isolation, that it is in a global village, and it is a village that it cannot extricate itself from. And there are certain treaties to which we are signatories, and we have signed off on these treaties, and we cannot really go back, right? We can't go back. You know, I really admire Joseph Patterson when he was president of the third party that was set up, right? But one of the things I've always been asking him when he was there as you know, the president, how are you going to extricate us from this global village, right? How are you going to take us out of some of the treaties that we have already signed off on for so many decades? How are you going to really do that? How are you going to contend with a global force, a global superpower, a military colossus as the United States? How are you going to do that? And right now, it's not only the United States, but you also have countries like Canada and other Western European countries, because we know that essentially Great Britain works with the United States, and whatever the United States says, Great Britain does. So when Jamaica thinks that, you know, becoming a republic is going to free us from Great Britain is submissive to the United States and often does the bidding of the United States. That's a well-known fact. That's not even my opinion. That's a well-known fact that that Great Britain does the bidding of the United States, right? So we need to understand that Great Britain doesn't have the power it used to have when, you know, before Jamaica, well, at least up till 1955, when its empire really came crushing down, right? So we've got to understand that and come to grips with the United States. And perhaps I need to really, you know, one day do a lecture on America in prophecy, because I think that many of us think that the United States is this passive, lamb-like creature, but the Bible says it's a lamb-like beast, which means that it's a beast, right? It's a beast like any of the other major empires that ever walked, that ever reigned on over this planet, right? Over planet Earth. It is a beast, but it behaves like it's lamb-like, which it professes through its laws, because a nation speaks through its laws. And through its laws, the United States came up looking like a lamb through the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, which suggests that all men are created equal and are endowed with certain unalienable rights, right? The fact of the matter is that that's how it came up, like a lamb, but it was really a lamb-like beast, not a lamb-like. It looked like a lamb, but it was really a beast. And this is how the United States has deceived many people. And many people think that she is not what she really is, which is essentially a beast, like Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, you know, the Assyrians, the Egyptians. She is a beast. She is a beast, and her quest is for full spectrum dominance, just like Babylon, just like Assyria, just like Greece, right? That is what she is aiming for, and she's going after, right? So Jamaica is not going to be an independent country, particularly as it is right there in her backyard where she runs the show. And oftentimes the United States has called all these Caribbean islands, including Latin America, her backyard. And with the level of poverty that we have in Jamaica and our economic dependence, what sort of republic do you think we are moving towards? I think the first thing, two major priorities that we should really be working on in Jamaica are, number one, the reduction in crime and violence. I said that yesterday. And today I shall, propose that we also become economic. We obtain some form of economic dependence, because we cannot continue like this. If we are economically dependent, it means therefore somebody controls us and we do not run the show, right? Somebody controls us and we do not run the show. right? And what is happening in Jamaica too is that we need a functioning, an active media that right now I think that our media have really lost their place in a free society. They're not even trying anymore. I think Jamaica, in terms of journalism, I think that the journalists in Jamaica have given up. Either they've been bought and they're making big bucks, like we see in the United States. We have like Rachel Maddow, what her name is, making $25 million per annum, right? That's a lot of money. So she doesn't just speak what she's told to speak, what she's told to speak, right? She's not going to speak the truth. She's not going to challenge the um the status quo, right? If she's earning $25 million per annum. And think about some of the other journalists, right? We would like to know what people like the Cliff Hughes and other people are earning. And why is it the Gleaner also, which seems to have lost its days of reporting, right? And its credibility. The Jamaica Observer is not better. We're not seeing the caliber of journalism that was exhibited, that was on display in years gone by. Since the death of what's his name? Martin Henry, and also the other Ian Boyne, we have not seen the caliber of journalism that we often saw in the Gleaner. And there is a vacuum in Jamaica in terms of analysis, and keeping the government on its feet and on its toes as far as levels of corruption are practiced and, you know, and expanded on. So this is what we have to look at. This is what we have to try to examine for ourselves, that we are living in an era, in a time of deception. And I think I hear people clamoring for freedoms. They're clamoring for Republican status. And that's what same thing was happening in France, in revolutionary France, right? The same thing. We talk about egalite and liberté, the same freedom and equality and brotherhood. Freedom, equality, and brotherhood. Everybody's clamoring for that. But what we saw in revolutionary France is that the oligarchy had so much garnered all of this wealth for themselves, right? All the wealth that France had through its empire, that it had acquired, that obtained through its imperial undertakings, most of it went back to the elites, to the monarchy, and to the financial, the economic elites. And they were not desirous of sharing it with the masses. They were simply taxing the masses, and masses had to carry a large portion of these taxes, and they were upset. Right? They were upset about what was happening. Right? They were upset about what was happening. And do you know that, when you talk about the French Empire and the fact that it helped the United States in its Revolutionary War, the Revolutionary War of Independence, the U.S. Revolutionary War of Independence, that France really loaned a lot of money to the United States, right, in its quest to fight off Britain. Not because France really wanted to, they were allies of the United States, it was because, they didn't want Great Britain to be empowered, right? They wanted Great Britain to be weakened. And they know that if Great Britain had lost the American colony, right, that she would be severely weakened, right? She would, and she was severely weakened after that sort of revolution. And then, she went into, that it was, Haiti. I guess the British, after losing the American colony in 1776, when they became independent, right now, remember now the Haitian Revolution started in 1791. So that time, I think that Britain was trying now to recover and to get another island, right, to reestablish its power and its economic supremacy in the world, that it really, really contested aggressively the opportunity, as it were, to get Saint Domingue, to get Haiti. It really, really put up a huge fight, right? But it lost. And according to C.L.R. James, its empire was weakened tremendously. The British Empire started, it was starting coming down. And that's why in 1806, we're seeing them now trying to abolish slavery, because they realized that they were being weakened, and that war. Can you imagine that? The French Revolution really caused a lot of, problems for the empires in Europe. Not only the French Empire, but also the British Empire. A lot of people do not speak. They tend to speak about the French Empire having lost its power, but we have to understand that the Haitian Revolution also posed, a significant problem for the sustenance and the survival of the British Empire, because they really fought hard. They put up a really huge fight in Haiti, in the form of Saint Domingue, so that they could have, because if they had gotten that island, which is a much bigger island than Jamaica, then their minds were that they would have been able to become very wealthy, because France was very wealthy, right, as a result of that colony. But Toussaint Louverture did not, and his slaves, right, not only his slaves, but let us say that his colleagues, right, his brethren and sisters, right, did not allow the British Empire to achieve that feat, right, and they were defeated, never to come back to power, right. They eventually died, as it were, right? And the British Empire continued until 1955, and the American Empire is what has replaced them as the major superpower. Remember, now we talk about Pax Americana, and Pax Americana means also supremacy, right? That's what it means. Pax Americana is the same thing like Pax Romana, right? The American dominance. When they say peace, it's not peace, because Pax in Latin means peace, as we have paz in Espanol, in Spanish, right? Means peace. But when they say peace, they mean domination. So when you hear them talking about peace in the Middle East, it's not peace. It has absolutely nothing to do with peace. And that is what you've got to understand. And this is why the Bible says, when they say peace, then what? Sudden destruction comes upon them, and they what? They shall not escape, because they mean war and dominance and military conquest, right? That is what they mean. So if you think that when they're talking about peace and these peace treaties and all of that nonsense, they are not trying to do that. So I just wanted to come here and to, expand, and to, just to unwind and talk about what I had gleaned from the protest, and to just let you know that Jamaica is not running the show, or Republican, what should I say now, quest, or quest to become a republic, I should say, or Republican ambition is not something that is going to be real, right? It's not real, not in this world now, where we do not have any real or any functioning democracy, as in the sense of the word, because remember, democracy means what? Of, or for, or by the people, right? Not by the elites. What we have now is our democracies of, or for, or by the elites, the political economic elites. And that is what we have to understand. Why are we not understanding that yet? So you're just going to vote, and, right, does not make a difference really, right? Because these elites select whom they want. And whether you like it or not, that is the person. Only God, in his power, his all being, an all-powerful being, can alter, right, whether or not this particular person whom they have selected takes office. Because only God sets up. He's the one who sets up, and he puts down. Thank you so much for joining. Hope that you will join me in another video as we seek to educate and to enlighten and to inform our public. audience. See you in the next one. Ciao.